Welcome to the Heart's Haven. Let the story begin. A poor girl warns a millionaire about his driver. Hours later, security cameras reveal everything. "Don't get in that car tonight, sir." The little girl's voice was barely louder than the rain. Nathaniel Reed stopped halfway beneath the glowing canopy of the Manhattan Grand Hotel, one polished shoe already stepping toward the black Escalade waiting at the curb. Behind him, laughter spilled out from the charity gala he had just abandoned early. Crystal chandeliers still shimmered through the glass doors. Wealthy donors still raised champagne glasses beneath golden lights. But suddenly, none of it mattered, because standing near the edge of the sidewalk was a little girl in a soaked yellow coat, staring directly at him like she'd seen something terrible. Rain dripped from the ends of her pale blonde hair. Her small sneakers were wet through, toes peeking from the fabric. She couldn't have been older than 8. And somehow, in the middle of one of the busiest streets in New York City, she looked completely alone. Nathaniel frowned slightly. His security team shifted nearby, already moving toward her. "Miss, you need to step back," one guard said firmly. But the girl didn't move. Her wide blue eyes stayed fixed on Nathaniel. "Please," she whispered again, trembling now. "Don't let him drive you tonight." The wind swept hard between the buildings, carrying the distant sound of sirens through the city. Nathaniel glanced toward the waiting SUV. Victor Hale stood beside the rear passenger door holding an umbrella, calm as always. 15 years. 15 years Victor had driven him through snowstorms, airport runs, board meetings, and sleepless nights. The man was practically invisible in Nathaniel's life now, steady and dependable like the ticking of a clock. Victor gave the little girl a polite smile, but the second she saw his face, she flinched. Not dramatically, not loudly, just one small step backward like her body reacted before her mind could. Nathaniel noticed, and for some reason that unsettled him more than the warning itself. "She's probably looking for money," one of the investors behind him muttered with a laugh. "Kids pull this stuff all the time." Nathaniel almost nodded automatically. Normally, he would have walked away without another thought. His life operated on schedules, facts, numbers, not strange warnings from frightened children standing in the rain. But then the girl spoke again. "He knows where the cameras don't look." The words hit with quiet precision. Nathaniel's expression changed slightly. Victor's smile didn't. The driver stepped forward smoothly, umbrella still raised. "Sir, the roads are getting worse. We should leave before traffic locks down Midtown." Professional, calm, perfectly timed. Yet something about the moment suddenly felt wrong. Nathaniel looked back at the girl. She hugged her arms tightly against herself, shivering beneath the cold rain. There was fear in her face, yes, but not the kind children use when they wanted sympathy. This looked different. This looked like guilt, like she already knew something bad was going to happen. "What's your name?" Nathaniel asked quietly. The girl hesitated, then finally answered, "Ellie." A taxi splashed through a puddle nearby. Neon reflections rippled across the wet pavement. Above them, security cameras blinked silently from the corners of the hotel entrance, watching everything. Or at least, almost everything. Nathaniel studied Ellie for another long second before reaching into his coat pocket and handing her his business card. "If you know something," he said carefully, "you come to my office tomorrow morning." Ellie looked down at the card in her trembling hand. Then her eyes slowly lifted toward Victor again. And for the first time in years, Nathaniel Reed felt something colder than the December rain slide down his spine. Fear. The ride downtown should have felt familiar. Nathaniel Reed sat in the back seat of the Escalade while rain slid across the tinted windows in silver streaks. The city lights outside blurred into soft colors, red brake lights melting into neon storefronts, and glowing holiday decorations hanging above Fifth Avenue. Normally, he used these quiet drives to review contracts or answer emails. His phone alone held more than 40 unread messages from board members and investors waiting for responses before morning. Tonight, he could not focus on a single word. His mind kept drifting back to the girl standing in the rain. Ellie, do not let him drive you tonight. Nathaniel loosened his tie slightly and glanced toward the front seat. Victor drove with the same calm precision he always had. Both hands steady on the wheel, posture perfect, eyes fixed ahead. Nothing seemed unusual, and yet the silence inside the vehicle felt heavier than normal. "You are quiet tonight, sir," Victor said after several blocks. Nathaniel looked up. "Long evening." Victor nodded once. "The fundraiser went well from what I heard. It always does." Outside, Christmas lights wrapped around bare trees lining the sidewalks. Couples hurried beneath umbrellas while steam drifted from subway grates into the freezing air. New York looked alive, warm, untouchable. But inside the SUV, Nathaniel felt a strange chill settling deeper into his chest. At the next intersection, Victor suddenly turned left. Nathaniel frowned immediately. "That is not the route home." "There is an accident on Park Avenue," Victor answered smoothly. "This will save us 20 minutes. Nathaniel stared through the windshield. The street ahead looked unusually empty for Manhattan at that hour. "How do you know there is an accident?" Victor paused for half a second. "Traffic reports." It was a normal answer, completely reasonable. Still, something about the delay bothered him. Nathaniel looked down at his phone and opened the city traffic app. Park Avenue showed moderate congestion, nothing more. Not enough to reroute. A small pulse of discomfort tightened in his stomach. Outside, the buildings became older, darker, fewer pedestrians, fewer lights. Then the dashboard radio crackled softly with static before cutting out entirely. Victor reached forward immediately to lower the volume. "Sorry about that," he said calmly. Nathaniel leaned back slowly, watching the reflection of Victor's eyes in the rearview mirror. For the first time in years, he realized he actually knew very little about the man who drove him every day. Victor had appeared in his life after Nathaniel's father died. Reliable, quiet, efficient. The kind of employee executives kept forever because they made problems disappear before anyone noticed them. 15 years. And not once had Nathaniel questioned him. The Escalade slowed near a red light beneath an aging parking structure. One flickering security camera hung from the concrete ceiling above the intersection, turning slowly from side to side. Nathaniel suddenly remembered Ellie's exact words. "He knows where the cameras do not look." A cold sensation moved through him again. "Stop the car," Nathaniel said abruptly. Victor blinked once in the mirror. "Sir?" "I said stop the car." The SUV pulled smoothly against the curb. For a moment, neither man spoke. Rain tapped softly against the roof. Nathaniel reached for the door handle, then paused. He did not even know why he felt uneasy anymore. Nothing had happened. No threat, no obvious danger, just a frightened little girl with trembling hands and eyes far too old for her age. Still, his instincts rarely failed him in business. And tonight, every instinct he had was screaming quietly beneath the surface. Victor turned slightly in his seat. "Is something wrong, Mr. Reed?" Nathaniel studied him carefully. The polite expression, the measured voice, the perfectly controlled posture. Then for the briefest second, Nathaniel noticed something strange resting beside Victor's wrist near the steering wheel. A small dark smear across the cuff of his gray glove. Victor noticed Nathaniel looking, and slowly, he lowered his hand out of sight. Nathaniel forced himself to look away from Victor's glove. It could have been anything. Grease from the engine, coffee, dirt from the rain. That was the logical explanation, and logic had built Nathaniel Reed's entire life. Still, his hands slowly pulled away from the door handle without fully relaxing. The uneasiness remained, sitting quietly beneath his ribs, like a warning he could not explain. Victor offered a small professional smile. "Would you prefer I continue to the penthouse, sir?" Nathaniel hesitated. "Yes," he answered finally. The SUV eased back into traffic. For the next 15 minutes, neither man spoke again. But Nathaniel watched everything now. The way Victor checked mirrors, the way his fingers tapped once against the steering wheel whenever they passed beneath traffic cameras, the way he seemed unusually aware of every black sedan around them. By the time the Escalade reached the underground entrance to Nathaniel's Midtown Tower, the rain had turned heavier. Water cascaded down the concrete ramp leading into the private garage below the building. Security gates lifted automatically as the vehicle approached. Nathaniel usually ignored the garage attendants completely. Tonight, his eyes drifted upward instead, toward the cameras. 3 mounted near the entrance, one above the elevator bay, another near the employee parking section. Blinking red lights in the shadows, watching. Victor parked smoothly beside the private elevator reserved for executive access. As always, he stepped out first and opened Nathaniel's door beneath the shelter of a large black umbrella. But before Nathaniel exited, Victor quietly spoke. "That girl tonight," he said carefully. "People in this city can be unpredictable. You should be cautious about who gets your attention." Nathaniel looked up slowly. The sentence sounded polite, helpful even, yet something about it tightened the air between them. Nathaniel stepped onto the wet concrete floor of the garage. "You seem concerned." Victor lowered his eyes respectfully. "I only look out for your safety, sir." For a long second, the distant hum of generators echoed through the underground structure. Then Nathaniel nodded once and entered the elevator alone. As the doors slid shut, he caught one final glimpse of Victor standing perfectly still beside the Escalade. Not moving, not leaving, just watching the elevator doors close. The penthouse above the city was silent when Nathaniel entered. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Manhattan, glowing beneath rain and winter fog. Thousands of lights stretched across the skyline like stars trapped beneath glass. Beautiful, cold, empty. Nathaniel loosened his cuffs and poured himself a glass of water. But even the simple act felt strange tonight. His reflection in the dark windows looked tired somehow, older. On the kitchen counter sat a framed photograph from 10 years earlier. Nathaniel and his father standing beside the first Reed Financial office in Chicago. Victor had taken that picture. The thought stopped him. Nathaniel stared at the frame for several quiet seconds before pulling out his phone. Without fully understanding why, he opened the employee database for Reed Financial Group and searched Victor Hale's file. Employment history, emergency contacts, background verification. Everything appeared flawless. Too flawless. Nathaniel frowned slightly. No family listed. No previous residence history before 15 years ago. Minimal records older than his employment start date. For most people, that might have meant nothing. But Nathaniel had spent decades analyzing risk, and missing information was often more dangerous than bad information. A sudden notification interrupted his thoughts. Security alert. Camera interruption detected. Nathaniel blinked. The alert came from the underground garage. Timestamp, 11:43 p.m. Exactly 7 minutes after he entered the elevator. His pulse slowed, then quickened again. The camera feed itself was already restored, but one section of footage showed temporary signal loss near the executive parking area. Nathaniel stared at the screen. 7 missing minutes. His eyes slowly narrowed. Then his phone vibrated again. Unknown number. He almost ignored it. Almost. But something made him answer. For 2 seconds there was only static. Then a tiny, trembling voice whispered through the line. "He knows you are starting to notice. Ellie." Nathaniel straightened immediately. "Where are you?" The little girl sounded terrified now, breathing fast as if hiding somewhere cold. "You cannot trust the garage cameras," she whispered. "Not all of them." A loud sound echoed near her side of the call, a door slamming somewhere nearby. Ellie gasped softly. Then the line went dead. Nathaniel stared at the dead phone line long after the call ended. The city outside his penthouse windows seemed quieter now. Even Manhattan's endless sirens and traffic noise felt distant beneath the storm rolling over the skyline. He knows you are starting to notice. The words repeated in his head with unsettling clarity. Nathaniel slowly lowered the phone and looked back toward the security alert still glowing on his screen. 7 missing minutes from the garage cameras. A frightened child warning him twice in one night. A driver with a spotless history that suddenly felt manufactured. None of it fit together. Yet every piece pointed in the same direction, toward Victor. Nathaniel exhaled slowly and pressed the intercom beside his kitchen counter. "Marianne, are you still awake?" His executive assistant answered almost immediately, voice groggy but alert. "Yes, Mr. Reed. I need access to archived garage security footage. All camera angles from tonight." A short pause followed. "That usually requires authorization from internal security." "I am authorizing it." Another pause. Then Marianne answered carefully. "Victor Hale oversees executive transport security records." Nathaniel's jaw tightened slightly. Of course he did. "Send the request through information technology directly," he said. "And Marianne—" "Yes, sir?" "Do not inform anyone else." The line clicked off. Nathaniel walked toward the windows, loosening his collar as thunder rolled faintly over the Hudson River. His penthouse suddenly felt too large tonight, too silent. His father used to say that real danger rarely announced itself loudly. The worst threats arrived politely, quietly, smiling while holding the door open for you. Nathaniel had dismissed that advice for years. Now he found himself remembering every strange detail involving Victor over the past month. The canceled meetings, the unexplained route changes, the employee in accounting who suddenly resigned after filing an internal complaint no one ever discussed again. At the time, Nathaniel had ignored it all. Executives survive by filtering out distractions, but maybe he had filtered out too much. His phone vibrated again. This time it was a message from Marianne. "Archive request denied. Backup servers temporarily unavailable." Nathaniel's expression hardened. Unavailable. At midnight, after a camera interruption. The timing felt impossible to ignore. He grabbed his coat immediately. 20 minutes later, Nathaniel stepped out of a private elevator inside Reed Financial headquarters. The building was nearly empty, except for overnight maintenance staff and a few security guards near the lobby. The marble hallways echoed beneath his footsteps. Cold white lights reflected across polished floors as he headed toward the surveillance office on sublevel 2. A young overnight technician nearly jumped when Nathaniel entered unexpectedly. "Mr. Reed." Nathaniel closed the office door behind him. "I want direct access to the garage archives." The technician hesitated nervously. "Sir, Victor already called about that." Nathaniel froze. "When?" "About 10 minutes ago. He said the system outage was already handled." Nathaniel felt the room grow very still around him. "What exactly did he tell you?" The technician swallowed hard. "He said some files were corrupted during the storm and that executive footage should remain restricted until morning." Restricted. Nathaniel looked toward the wall of surveillance monitors humming softly across the room. Dozens of camera feeds flickered from different sections of the tower. Lobby, elevators, parking levels, loading docks. Then his eyes stopped on one particular screen, Garage Level B, near the executive parking section. The image looked normal at first glance, until Nathaniel noticed the timestamp. It was delayed by exactly 7 minutes. His pulse slowed, then sharpened. "Can you rewind that feed?" he asked quietly. The technician frowned. "That is strange. It should be live." Nathaniel stepped closer to the monitor. On screen, Victor's Escalade sat parked beneath dim overhead lights exactly where it had been earlier that night. Empty, silent. But as the delayed footage continued rolling, another figure slowly entered frame from the shadows near the concrete stairwell. A little girl in a yellow coat. Ellie. Nathaniel's breath caught instantly. She looked terrified. She kept glancing behind her as if someone was nearby. Then the footage suddenly glitched. Static flickered across the monitor. The screen cut black for 3 seconds. And when the image returned, Ellie was gone. The surveillance office fell completely silent. Nathaniel stared at the dark monitor while static hissed softly to the speakers overhead. The young technician beside him shifted nervously in his chair, unsure whether to speak. But Nathaniel barely heard anything anymore. Ellie had been there, in the garage, alone, terrified. And somehow the footage vanished the exact moment she disappeared from frame. "That was not a weather outage," Nathaniel said quietly. The technician swallowed hard. "Sir, I did not touch the feed." "I know." Nathaniel kept his eyes on the screen another moment before stepping closer to the monitor wall. His reflection stared back faintly through the glow of security footage and flickering timestamps. For years, he had trusted systems because systems felt safer than people. Numbers, schedules, reports, procedures. They did not lie. But tonight, every system around him suddenly felt manipulated by invisible hands. "Can you recover the missing seconds?" Nathaniel asked. The technician shook his head slowly. "Not from this terminal. If the files were overwritten remotely, only the backup server would have traces left." "Where is the backup server located?" "Sublevel 4. Nathaniel frowned immediately. Sublevel 4 was restricted maintenance access. Almost no employees used it anymore, except engineering staff and executive transport personnel, Victor included. Thunder rumbled faintly outside the tower as Nathaniel removed his coat and draped it over the back of a chair. "Pull up all garage activity from tonight," he ordered calmly. The technician typed quickly. Multiple security windows filled the screens. Employees leaving, cleaning crews, maintenance carts. Then one detail caught Nathaniel's attention. At 11:38 p.m., only minutes before the camera interruption, Victor's access card had been used near the sublevel 4 server corridor. Nathaniel's pulse slowed. Zoom in. The image sharpened slightly. Victor appeared walking through the corridor, carrying something small beneath his arm. A yellow object. Nathaniel leaned closer. His stomach tightened instantly. A child's raincoat. The same pale yellow Ellie had been wearing outside the hotel. For several seconds, Nathaniel could not speak. The technician looked visibly shaken now. "Sir, should I call security?" Nathaniel's eyes never left the screen. "No." The answer came too fast, too instinctively, because suddenly he understood something deeply unsettling. If Victor truly controlled portions of the surveillance network, then ordinary building security could already be compromised. Nathaniel stepped back slowly, thinking. Ellie had warned him twice. Not run, not begged for money, warned him. Which meant whatever frightened her mattered more than her own safety. A painful realization settled into his chest then. No child should carry fear like that. No child should sound that exhausted at 8 years old. Nathaniel thought about the way she had trembled in the rain, while every adult around her dismissed her as invisible. The investors, the guards, even him, especially him. His father once told him that powerful people often miss the truth because they stopped listening to small voices. Tonight, a little girl had risked everything trying to make him listen, and he almost ignored her. Nathaniel straightened suddenly. "Can you track where Victor's vehicle is now?" The technician typed rapidly again. A blinking GPS signal appeared on the map. Still inside the building, sublevel 4, Nathaniel's jaw tightened. Below them, somewhere beneath layers of steel and concrete, Victor was still there. And for the first time all night, Nathaniel stopped feeling confused. Now he felt certain. Something terrible had been hidden inside his company for a very long time. And somehow, Ellie had seen it first. Nathaniel did not wait for building security. Something deep inside him no longer trusted the polished systems surrounding Reed Financial Tower. Too many doors were connected to Victor. Too many cameras answered to the same network. And somewhere below the building, a frightened little girl might still be hiding. The elevator to sublevel 4 descended slowly to the tower's underground structure. Metal cables hummed overhead while fluorescent lights flickered against brushed steel walls. Nathaniel stood alone inside the elevator, his pulse unusually loud in the silence. He could still picture Ellie standing in the rain outside the hotel, so small, so terrified, yet brave enough to warn a complete stranger. Most adults would have stayed silent. She had not. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Sub-level 4 looked nothing like the elegant floors above. The air was colder here, carrying the faint smell of concrete, dust, and machinery. Long utility corridors stretched beneath exposed pipes and humming server units. Half the overhead lights were dim for the night. Some sections blinked intermittently. Nathaniel moved carefully down the hallway, shoes echoing softly against the cement floor. Ahead, beyond a security door labeled "Authorized Personnel Only," he spotted a faint light beneath the frame. The server room. As he approached, he heard voices. One of them belonged to Victor. Calm, controlled, almost soothing. "You do not need to be afraid," Victor said quietly. "I am trying to help you." Nathaniel's stomach tightened instantly. Another voice answered softly. "Ellie, you deleted the cameras," she whispered. A long pause followed. Then Victor sighed. "You saw something you were not supposed to see." Nathaniel stepped closer silently, remaining just outside the partially open doorway. Inside, rows of blinking servers cast blue light across the room. Victor stood near a control terminal with his back partially turned. Ellie sat curled tightly in a chair near the wall, still wearing damp clothes beneath the oversized yellow raincoat. She looked exhausted, but unharmed. Nathaniel released a breath he did not realize he had been holding. Victor continued speaking in the same unnervingly calm tone. "Mr. Reed trusts me. He has trusted me for years. You should not have involved yourself." Ellie's small hands tightened around something in her lap. Nathaniel narrowed his eyes. A silver access badge. Corporate security. "You dropped this in the garage," Ellie whispered shakily. "The lady was crying before she ran away." Victor's posture stiffened almost invisibly. Nathaniel felt the air leave his lungs. Suddenly, the missing employee complaint from weeks earlier returned sharply to his memory. A young financial analyst named Dana Mercer had abruptly resigned after reporting irregular executive transport expenses connected to confidential accounts. No one ever explained her disappearance from the company. No one questioned it, because Victor handled the internal report personally. Nathaniel stepped fully into the doorway then. "Enough." Victor turned immediately. For the first time in 15 years, genuine surprise crossed his face. "Mr. Reed." Ellie looked up so quickly her eyes widened with relief. "You came back." The words hit Nathaniel harder than he expected. "You came back." As though adults leaving her behind had become normal. Nathaniel moved toward her slowly, without taking his eyes off Victor. "What exactly is happening here?" he asked coldly. Victor straightened his gloves calmly. "A misunderstanding." But now Nathaniel noticed it clearly. The tension beneath Victor's controlled expression, the subtle calculation in his eyes. Not loyalty, not concern, control. And suddenly Nathaniel realized the most dangerous people were not always loud or cruel. Sometimes they were simply the ones no one ever thought to question. The server room felt colder now. Rows of blue lights blinked steadily across the walls, while rainwater dripped faintly from Ellie's yellow coat onto the concrete floor. Somewhere overhead, thunder rolled through the city like distant waves. Victor remained perfectly composed, too composed. Nathaniel had spent years negotiating billion-dollar deals, reading investors, spotting deception hidden behind polished smiles. And now, standing beneath the humming servers of his own building, he recognized the expression on Victor's face for what it truly was. Not panic, preparation. Victor slowly removed his gloves, finger by finger, placing them neatly beside the terminal. "You are making assumptions based on fear," he said calmly. Nathaniel stepped closer to Ellie. "Give me the badge." The little girl immediately handed him the silver security pass with trembling hands. Nathaniel examined it carefully beneath the pale server light. Dana Mercer, executive financial analyst, status, active. Nathaniel's chest tightened. Active. Yet no one had seen Dana inside the company for nearly 3 weeks. Victor folded his hands behind his back. Dana resigned voluntarily. Then why is her access badge still active? Nathaniel asked sharply. Victor did not answer immediately, and that silence finally said more than words ever could. Ellie looked up carefully from her chair. "I saw her crying in the garage," she whispered. "She kept saying she needed to tell somebody." Nathaniel turned toward her gently. "When?" "A few nights ago. I sleep near the church kitchen across the street sometimes." Ellie swallowed nervously. "I heard yelling underground after the garage door opened." Victor's jaw tightened slightly for the first time. "She misunderstood a private conversation," he interrupted smoothly. But Nathaniel no longer believed smooth answers. Not tonight. He walked toward the central server terminal and glanced at the security playback logs displayed on screen. Multiple files had been manually altered over the past month. Camera reroutes, deleted timestamps, restricted access overrides. Someone had been controlling what the building saw and who it remembered. Nathaniel's voice lowered dangerously. "You used my company's surveillance system to hide something." Victor finally dropped the calm smile entirely. "You trusted me to protect this company," he said quietly, "and I did. By manipulating evidence? By handling problems before they damaged you." The words echoed through the server room. Nathaniel suddenly realized Victor truly believed he was justified. That was the terrifying part. Not rage, not chaos, conviction. Ellie slowly slid off the chair beside Nathaniel, staying close to him now as though she had finally decided he was safe. Then she pointed toward one of the monitors near the back wall. "Play that one." Nathaniel followed her finger. Camera B14, garage lower ramp, timestamp from 3 nights earlier. Victor immediately stepped forward. "That footage is corrupted." Nathaniel ignored him and pressed play. Static flickered briefly across the screen before the image stabilized. A black sedan appeared entering the garage late at night. Dana Mercer stepped out carrying a folder against her chest. She looked upset, pacing near the elevator while speaking on her phone. Then Victor entered frame. No sound existed on the recording, but the tension between them was obvious immediately. Dana backed away. Victor reached toward the folder calmly, saying something Nathaniel could not hear. Then the footage skipped ahead several seconds. Ellie grabbed Nathaniel's sleeve tightly. "Watch the mirror," she whispered. Nathaniel narrowed his eyes. Near the polished elevator doors, a reflection briefly appeared during the skipped frames. Victor was not trying to calm Dana. He was taking documents from her hands. Documents clearly marked with Reed financial letterheads. Offshore accounts. Unauthorized transfers. Nathaniel's blood ran cold. This was never just about surveillance. Victor had been hiding financial crimes inside the company itself, and Dana Mercer had discovered them. The screen flickered once more. Then suddenly another figure appeared faintly in the reflection behind Dana. A child in a yellow raincoat. Ellie, watching everything from the shadows. Nathaniel stared at the frozen reflection on the monitor. Ellie, small, hidden near the concrete wall in her yellow raincoat, witnessing everything alone. The realization hit him like ice water. This little girl had carried the weight of that memory by herself for days, while every adult around her looked the other way. Victor took a careful step backward. "Mr. Reed, you do not understand the full situation." Nathaniel turned slowly. "Then explain it." For the first time, Victor seemed less polished. The perfect calm around him had started to crack. "She was going to destroy the company," Victor said quietly. "Dana copied confidential financial records. If those documents became public, thousands of employees could have lost their jobs." Nathaniel's expression hardened instantly. "So you erased evidence?" I protected what you built. The server lights flickered softly across Victor's face. He no longer sounded like a driver speaking to his employer. He sounded like a man defending years of hidden decisions. Nathaniel suddenly understood something terrifying. Victor had convinced himself that loyalty excused dishonesty. And people like that were dangerous because they stopped seeing the difference between protection and control. Ellie tugged lightly on Nathaniel's sleeve. "He saw me near the elevator that night," she whispered. "That is why I ran away when I saw him again." Nathaniel crouched slightly so he could meet her eyes. Up close, she looked exhausted beyond her years. Dark circles rested beneath her pale blue eyes, and her small hands still trembled against the edge of her coat. "You did nothing wrong," Nathaniel said gently. The words seemed to break something inside her. Ellie looked down quickly, blinking hard as though she was trying not to cry. No one had probably told her that in a very long time. Suddenly, footsteps echoed through the hallway outside the server room. Two New York police officers entered alongside Reed Financial's head of internal compliance, Marianne Collins. She looked pale after seeing the recovered footage already uploaded from the backup servers. Victor's eyes shifted toward the doorway. Not panicked, calculating. But it was too late now. Marianne held several printed financial reports tightly against her chest. "Nathaniel, the offshore accounts are real. Dana Mercer tried to report them weeks ago." Silence filled the room. The blinking server lights, the distant hum of the building, the storm above Manhattan. Everything suddenly felt painfully clear. Victor lowered his gaze at last. "I never meant for things to go this far." One of the officers stepped forward calmly. "Sir, we need you to come with us." Victor did not resist. As the officers escorted him toward the hallway, he paused briefly beside Nathaniel. "I was loyal to you," he said quietly. Nathaniel looked at him for a long moment before answering. "No, you were loyal to control." Then Victor disappeared down the corridor beneath the cold fluorescent lights. And for the first time all night, the building finally felt honest again. 3 weeks later, snow began falling over Manhattan. Soft, quiet, gentle enough to blur the sharp edges of the city. From the windows of Reed Financial Tower, the streets below looked almost peaceful now. The investigation surrounding Victor Hale had spread across financial news networks nationwide. Federal auditors had uncovered hidden transfers, falsified reports, and years of manipulated surveillance records buried inside the company's systems. Nathaniel Reed spent days restructuring departments his own negligence had allowed to rot in silence. But strangely, none of that weighed on him as heavily anymore as one simple thought. A little girl had tried to tell the truth, and no one listened, until it was almost too late. That afternoon, Nathaniel stood outside a small church shelter on West 47th Street, holding 2 cups of hot chocolate in gloved hands. Snow gathered lightly across the shoulders of his dark wool coat, while children's laughter drifted faintly from inside the building. The shelter director opened the door with a warm smile. "She has been asking if you would come back." Nathaniel felt something tighten quietly in his chest. Inside, the air smelled like soup, cinnamon, and old radiators. Christmas decorations made from paper snowflakes hung unevenly across the walls. Near the far corner of the room, Ellie sat at a small folding table drawing carefully with colored pencils. When she looked up and saw him, she froze. Not out of fear this time, out of disbelief. Nathaniel walked toward her slowly and placed one of the hot chocolates beside her drawing paper. Tiny marshmallows floated near the top. "For you," he said gently. Ellie stared at the cup for a second before wrapping both hands around it carefully like something precious. "You really came back," she whispered. Nathaniel sat across from her quietly. "I said I would." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Snow tapped softly against the church windows, while warm yellow lights glowed overhead. Ellie finally pushed her drawing across the table toward him. It showed a tall, black building beneath falling snow, and beside it, a little girl in a yellow coat standing next to a man in a dark overcoat. But what caught Nathaniel's attention most was the detail she added above them. Cameras. Dozens of them. Except now, every camera lens pointed upward toward the sky instead of down at people. Nathaniel looked at her carefully. "Why did you draw them like that?" Ellie shrugged slightly. "Because maybe people should watch over each other instead." The words landed softly, but they stayed. Nathaniel looked around the shelter then, at the tired mothers helping children with homework, at volunteers serving soup, at people the city passed every day without seeing. For years, he had believed power came from control, from money, from systems. But sitting there across from an 8-year-old girl with a paper cup of hot chocolate between her small hands, he finally understood something else entirely. Real safety did not come from cameras. It came from compassion. And sometimes the smallest voice in the room was the one brave enough to save everyone else.